and everybody that joins us studying online, and glad you're able to join us. Wish you could be here with us in person. Come anytime you can. We've been working through the Psalms. There's 150 of them, and we only have 13 lessons, so we have to study as much as we can, and we're just kind of bouncing around. Today we'll be in Psalm 139. Psalm 139, and today's lesson is called God's Greatness. Had so many thoughts of what this writer could have titled this lesson, because their lesson just talks about so many aspects of what God can do for us. And anyway, the thought that we have here is that because God has made us, He knows us personally, and He is with us always. My mother-in-law, Miss Jean Pennell, can cook really good, and anytime some of her daughters want to know how to make something, they'll say, "Mama, can you tell us the recipe?" She says, "Well, I don't really have a recipe written down. It's in my head." And she says, "Well, show us how to make so and so." So she'll start, and she'll say, "Well, how much did you just put in there?" "You just put the right amount." "Well, how much is it?" "Well, it's just the right amount." And they're like, "We need to know a measurement, you know." And so she said, "Well, it's you put it till it tastes right." And that's the way a lot of those older cooks do, you know. And then they'll say, "Well, wait a minute, now you didn't put water, you just used chicken broth." She said, "Well, I thought everybody knew that, you know." And so the point of that example is, because she made it, she knows everything about it. She knows what ingredients she used. She knows exactly how much it should have and what it's exactly supposed to taste like. There's a purpose behind it. So that's maybe a poor example of our today's lesson, but we're talking today about how David acknowledges and recognizes that because God made him, He knows everything about him. And I think whenever we reach that point in our life that we can realize that, Perry, you talked about your coworker there, he's going through the same thing that most everybody has to go through in their life. They're finally reaching the place that they've looked everywhere else there is in the world to find peace and happiness, until they finally figured out the peace and happiness was right there with them the whole time. Just understanding that God made me, I'm supposed to do what I can to glorify Him, and there's my peace. Once we kind of figure out that it's not about us, that it's about Him, that the most important thing that we can do is just obey Him and trust in Him and glorify Him and the things that we say and do, there's our peace. There's no better day for me than when I've gone through a day not trying to serve myself, but in trying to serve God instead, and trying to serve others. But everybody needs a purpose. We've talked about some that have tragically done things, and they're seeking a purpose. Everybody wants a purpose to be here. In this psalm, David is talking about how he's recognizing what God is, who God is, how great God is, and what God knows, and that God knows everything. When we're growing up, we hear that God knows everything. God's everywhere, and trying to understand that as a 5 and 7 year old is kind of tough. But the older we get, the more mature we are, the more mature our minds become, we begin to understand that's an amazing thing, that God knows the heartbeat of an ant, and yet knows how to make the sun stay exactly where it is all the time. The big things and tiny things all at once, and can do all of it at the same time. Billions of people, and manage their lives and keep a hold on everything that they are. It's just an amazing thing to think about, that God's doing all that at the same time. It just blows your mind. Anyway, we're going to go ahead and read, and we're actually going to stop at verse 16, even though the psalm goes a little farther. But we're going to actually go ahead and read, and we'll read the scripture as printed in our study book, verses 1 through 4, and then 7 through 16. Then we'll go back through, because I think it would be better if we have the whole context to work from. So let's start reading verse 1. "Lord, you have searched me and known me. You know when I sit down and when I stand up. You understand my thoughts from far away. You observe my travels and my rest. You are aware of all my ways. before a word is on my tongue, you know all about it. Verse 7, where can I go to escape your spirit? Where can I flee from your presence? If I go up to heaven, you're there. If I make my bed in Sheol, you are there. If I fly on the wings of the dawn and settle down on the western horizon, even there your hand will lead me. Your right hand will hold on to me. If I say, surely the darkness will hide me, and the light around me will be night. Even the darkness is not dark to you. The night shines like the day. Darkness and light are alike to you. For it was you who created my inward parts. You knit me together in my mother's womb. I will praise you because I have been remarkably and wondrously made. Your works are wondrous, and I know this very well. My bones were not hidden from you when I was made in secret, when I was formed in the depths of the earth. Your eyes saw me when I was formless. All my days were written in your book and planned before a single one of them began. So when we read those verses, we see how much thought David is putting into this psalm. I think David had a mind that was very deep. He was able to connect with God on a very high level, I think because he sought God as God was seeking for him too. David, remember, was a shepherd, and he's sitting out in the field with the sheep, and there ain't a whole lot else to do except hang out with the animals. I mean, it wasn't his job to go farm. It wasn't his job to work at home. It wasn't his job to chop wood. He was keep the sheep safe. And so when you're doing that and that's all you do, you got a lot of time to think. I do some of my best thinking cutting grass. Some of these guys might relate to that. That's my time where I just ride. All I got to do is make lines or circles, cut the grass, and I can think about a lot of things. And I think that David had the ability to see God at a very young age, and he was able to see the wonder of God. And then you think about all of David's life. Those of you that know, remember his life, how he, as a young boy, he was anointed as the king, and then he had the whole encounter with Goliath, and then later he becomes the king, and then he of course has his mishaps and his bad mistakes, but still grows up from that. And all these things that David goes through in his life, he goes through the same types of things that people in our world go through, making mistakes, having successes, having to rely on God, trusting him. Maybe have a time when it's really, really good, and then other times where you're in a valley. And being able to understand that and lean on God the whole time helped him, I think, to understand God in a deeper way. This kind of psalm helps me a lot because it reminds me that the God we serve and the God who created us is pretty incredible, and it's something that we can't put into words. And he does a pretty good job here, but there's still more you could say. You know how when you're trying to tell somebody you went somewhere, and for example, we went whitewater rafting. Well, I can tell you all about the rafting, but I'm old enough now I can appreciate the scenery, because I can see stuff from the water looking at the trees that I can't see right now on the highway looking at the trees. It's a different view, but I can't tell you about it and make it be what it really was. And he's trying his best to tell us about his feelings toward God, how he looks at God and he's amazed by him, and his words can't do it justice, but he's doing his best. But there's three things that David notes in this psalm here, and we'll go through them in sections kind of, but there's three things for us to remember. One is he acknowledges God's knowledge, how much God knows. He tells us that through those first few verses. Then he talks about that God is always present with us, that he's always with us, no matter what. Do you remember when you were little and somebody said, God's everywhere? And you're thinking, where? Is he here? You mean he's here too? He's everywhere. Well, how can he be everywhere? And it's our beginning phases of trying to understand just how big God really is. And then the last part, he focuses on God's power, how powerful God is. You don't have to be at the ocean long to start looking at it and go, that's a pretty powerful body of water. And the hurricane can come from that a mass of water can flip a boat over, or can wipe out a beach. We look at flooding that we saw in our state last year and see how much destruction, the power that's there. Well, God created that water, and God created mountains, and God created thunder and lightning, and you listen to it, and we have one little pop at our house, and oh, man, that's loud. But there's thunderstorms all over. My point is that David's recognizing just how powerful God is. So as he writes this psalm, he's talking about that. So let's start in verse 1. We'll kind of go back through, and then we'll just sort of summarize at the end. So he says, Lord, you have searched me and known me. So to truly know somebody, we've used this example before, I know Michael Jordan. I know who he is. He doesn't know me, but I know who he is. But if I say, okay, I know Michael Jordan, but I don't know what kind of food Michael Jordan likes. I don't know what kind of music he likes. Now, my wife, on the other hand, I know her. I spend time with her. We're talking every day. I know what kind of food she likes, what kind of music she likes, what kind of TV shows she likes. I know she wants to go to bed early, go to bed late. I know all these things. That's a different relationship because we're connected in a closer way. Not so with Michael Jordan. He's just somebody I know of. But here, David's talking about, so Lord, you have searched me, or you've examined me, and you know me. So you've known me. He's saying, he's amazing how much God spends time trying to know who he is. And we've talked about a relationship in here before between a parent and a child. How that relationship is different between, say, a child and their teacher, or a child and a soccer coach, or whatever it might be. So they know them a little bit. No, mom and dad, they know them because they live with them. They're raising them. They're teaching them things. They're feeding them, buying clothes for them, going through holidays and vacations with them, birthdays. They know everything. They remember what they looked like when they were born. They know them. So he says, you have searched me and you know me. And then look at the verbs that we see over the next few verses. You know when I sit down and when I stand up. You understand my thoughts from far away. You observe my travels and my rest. And you are aware of all my ways. And before a word is on my tongue, you know all about it. Look at all the things that David uses, that he knows, understands, observes, and he's aware. God knows all those things about us. Before I'm going to do something this afternoon at 2:45 p.m., God already knows what it is. He already knows my thought on next Tuesday. He knows everything that I have done, everything I'm going to do. If nobody else on this earth ever hears about it, he knows what's in my head. And so David here is expressing how he has recognized that God knows everything about him. And we read the verse over in the New Testament where it says, God even knows how many hairs are on your head. Some got more than others. But he knows at all times how many hairs on your head. And so he knows all your fears and all your doubts. And he knows all your worries and all your things that you're happy about. And he knows all those things, and that's a scary thought, and it's so comforting at the same time. So it can be one of two things, but he knows all those things. This feeds right into the next thought, is that God is omniscient. That's a big fancy word for saying he is everywhere and he knows everything. You remember that when you were younger, maybe your teacher catch somebody doing something wrong, and you think, how in the world did that lady see that from way over there facing another direction? You think she got eyes in the back of her head, that was the phrase. Because she knew the students and their behaviors. It didn't take long. She knew which ones were behaving and which ones she had to keep an eye on. She knew which one, if there was a noise made, she knew who it was because she's observing, she's watching, she understands them. And so the same thing with parents and kids. Say the parents got 3 kids, and this one might be the quiet one, this one might be the rambunctious one. Things start happening, they know exactly which one did what. So David's talking here about all those things that he says, you know all about it. And I think that kind of sums up that section. You know all about it. You know all about me. He knows everything about you and what's good and bad in your life, what you're afraid of, what you're worried about, what you're proud of, what you're happy about, what you're looking forward to, what your goals are, your plans are. And he knows it all. And David recognizes that. All right, so verse 7, it says, based on that thought he has, if you know everything, he said, where can I go? If I'm going to try to escape you, there's nowhere I can go. Where can I go to escape your spirit? And God's spirit is alive and active in the Old Testament. You remember all the times, and we're going to actually hit some of these names, I hope we have time. Old Testament characters where you say, well, God's spirit so-and-so, and God's spirit spoke to this one, and God's spirit rested on that one. And it just shows us how God's spirit was active in the Old Testament in dealing with these people, so that David says, where can I go to escape your spirit? Where is there a place for me to be? Where can I flee from your presence? He says, if I go to heaven, you're there. If I make my bed in Sheol, you're there. Now, Sheol is the place of the grave, or the place of death for them in this, the place of the dead or the underworld. He's showing a parallel. If I go to heaven, if I go into Sheol, either one, you're there. If I fly on the wings of the dawn, sail on the western horizon, even there, you're going to be me. If your right hand's going to hold on to me. He says, there's nowhere I can go to escape you. He says, if I say, surely the darkness will hide me, and the light around me will be night. Well, even the darkness is not dark to you. Like he says, well, you created all this stuff. You created the darkness, you created the light. And since you are light, if there is darkness, it's not going to be darkness to you. You're going to illuminate it. There's no way for that to be dark. It says the night shines like the day, and the darkness and light are light to you. So he says there's no way I can get away from you. Now this is where I started thinking of examples. The minute I got to this verse, I started thinking about people that ran from God, trying to escape. And the first one I thought of was Jonah, just because that's a familiar story for us where we know somebody ran away. And if you remember that when we studied Jonah, all those verses saying Jonah went down to this city, and then Jonah went down to the docks, and then Jonah went down in the boat, and the next thing you know, Jonah's down in the water, in the fish's belly. But all of that was to try to run from what God wanted him to do. And he was trying to run away, and he said, there's no way can I escape. And he winds up in that fish's belly, and what does he do? He cries out to God, because God's with him there too. And so he finally figures out there's no way to escape. The other one I thought about was Elijah. Do you remember when Elijah has the competition with all the Baal priests, and they were going, who can burn up, who can call down from heaven, call down fire? And he calls down a whammo. They got the water around us, everything, and he calls down the fire, and it consumes it, licks up the water, and then they all get killed. And then right after that is when the queen got all mad, and he ran for his life because he got scared, and he ran and hid in a cave. And then God asked him and said, what are you doing here? Why are you here? Why are you running? And he said, I can't even run from God. I can't even hide in this cave and get away from God. So these are just a few examples. But David said, where can I go to escape you? There's nowhere on this earth or in my life that I can escape from you. You're everywhere. All right, so then slide down to verse 13. And this is when his psalm changes from acknowledging God's knowledge and his presence. He turns into praise. It turns kind of into praise because he starts recognizing, you made me. And he starts recognizing how important it is to him that God spent so much time just on him. So we look at them. You're going to recognize, all these moms are going to recognize, because these little verses in here, they wind up on these prints when somebody gets pregnant with a baby. Here they are. It was you who created my inward parts. You knit me together in my mother's womb. Y'all have seen that before. I will praise you because I have been remarkably and wondrously made. And you see David started to change. Said, you created me, just like I am. Have you ever noticed, I do this a lot. I didn't used to do it as much as I do now. People watching and getting somewhere and you go, it's incredible how many different people there are here. This one's tall, this one's short. You know, this one's got longer arms, this one doesn't, whatever. Just different. You just look at their bodies. Their head's shaped different. Their hair is different, different color, different eyes, whatever it is. And look at them, you know, and their personalities. Then you work with, say you work with kids or whatever, and this kid's wide open, this kid's calm, this one wants to talk a lot, this one never speaks. All those different things that just make you go, God spent time on each of these people to make them a certain way. And that's, I think one of the most important things for kids is for them to understand, because, you know, we've all been there. You get through middle school and high school and you feel like you got to be popular like everybody else and be in the cool club, and then you graduate and you say, well, that was just dumb. So, but understanding that it really doesn't matter if you're like everybody else, as long as you understand you're important to God and find your worth in that. And here this is what David's kind of doing. You created me right down to my inward parts. You knit me together in my mother's womb, which means while I was being formed, you put me together in a certain way. You wanted my toes to be shaped this certain way. You want me to have this color eyes, whatever it is. And he says, I'm going to praise you because I've been remarkably and wondrously made. And that's where he kind of recognizes just how much detail God put into him. Your works are wondrous, and I know this very well. He's got something to base it on. He said God to guide him through the things in his life so far. And he says, my bones were not hidden from you when I was made in secret, when I was formed in the depths of the earth. I like this verse because when a mom and a dad are they're waiting 9 months for that baby. Now, they're going to do all they want to. They do sonic imaging or whatever they call it, and you 4D stuff. Okay, you can tell what that baby's head is shaped like, but it's never exactly what that screen looks like. And when they're born, you get a surprise. I mean, no matter what it's a surprise. We get to see what they look like finally. Okay, it's not like if I'm gonna buy you a present for Christmas, and it's gonna be a pair of shoes, but I don't tell you anything about it. And then when you open the box, oh man, now I got, and that's the way this is I was made in secret. God doesn't tell us what we're going to be. He just makes us. And it says, I was formed in the depths of the earth. My bones were not hidden from you. He just completely just gives God all this praise for doing this miraculous thing in creating him. And then he says, all my days were written. He goes even further. He says, you didn't just create me. You've mapped out my life. You've got plans for me. You've got goals for me. You've got a purpose for me that I've just got to find. And that's the hardest part, I think, is for us to ever figure out that once we decide to follow God's will, that plan starts to come in front of us, whatever it is. And David says here that those things were planned before a single one of them began. So David acknowledges God's special and purposeful design of him. And we look at David's life and we can see the purpose God had for him. It was an amazing purpose, just like some others. So we've looked at some of those things now, the 3 sections, the different verbs where God knows everything. He searches and knows us, understands us, all those things. That God's everywhere in the second portion of it. That there's no distance is great enough to escape him. The one example that I didn't point to going through, but we'll hit it again here, is Adam and Eve tried to run from God as well, and they tried to hide, and there was no place to hide. They tried to cover themselves up. You remember, to cover up that sin, and there was no way to hide from God. So his presence is 2 things. It can be something that is not good, but his presence can be something that's really, really good. So the example I heard this week, which helped me understand this better, is if you're on, and I've been through this before, go through the self-checkout at Walmart. Okay, this is always fun. And you, whether you know it or not, you're being recorded. And if you put 2 things in that bag and don't scan both of them, there's a little man that's going to come walking over to you and say, hey, what's going on here? They're checking you out to make sure you don't steal anything. I've had it happen. 2 the same thing, scan, and I put them both in the cart. It was the same item, and they had to come and check it and go back and watch the thing to make sure I wasn't doing it. Anyway, that's a video, a presence, somebody watching to make sure you don't do something wrong. How about this camera? The one that's over your baby's crib. That's a camera of safety. Somebody, a presence there to make sure everything is right. So there's two ways to look at that God's presence is with us. His presence can also be a constant comfort to those who seek and trust him. I'm glad God's watching me all the time, because there's times when I really need him. And I say, I'm so glad you are paying attention to keep me out of trouble, to save me from getting hurt, to keep me from making a mistake, to protect me. So God's presence is always there. And then that last part about God's power. His power is amazing, and it's invincible, and it's purposeful, and God knows everything from beginning to end because he created it all. And it was all by his design, everything that will ever exist. Things that the writer had in there I want to point out as we're finishing up. He wrote, and this is really good, talking about his power. David recognized that from his conception, God was fashioning every part of him. The language depicts intricate care and precision, such as those who made thread and then wove it into fabrics. Remarkably and wondrously means that God created us uniquely in a way that should produce awe and worship. God made us in his image to glorify him. From the moment we were conceived, the Lord has had his eyes on us. He has made every human life for a purpose, and no one is an accident. And that's a good reminder for us all the time to understand that God spent that kind of time and detail on us. We had a lesson a year or two ago, and in that lesson I can remember learning how God is able to manage the huge things in life as well as tiny things in life. For example, somebody's praying because there's a storm coming at their home at the coast, let's say that. That's a huge prayer. At the same time, somebody's praying for their loved one who is near the end of their life, and they're very deathly sick. And at the same time, there's a little 7-year-old that's upset because their puppy's sick that day. How God can manage all those things, and that all of them are important to him at the same time, because all those people he created and has his eye on and knows them. And so those purposes are important. Now, last night I just started listing people, and we got to wrap up in about 5 minutes. I just started listing people, and I went through the best I could remember in order of the history of the Bible, people that God had chosen for a purpose, how he specifically had a purpose for that one person, and just started writing, and before I knew it, I had a whole list. And so we may not get through all of them, but just to get your mind thinking on this, Noah, of course Adam and Eve we've already just mentioned, but Noah, there's a man in a time period where the world was so sinful, but yet God chose Noah, that one man. He was born with that purpose, to be the one who would lead that ark and save humanity by being obedient. Okay? Abraham, later we call the father of many nations. And there he is obedient to God and does what he does, and we know what that leads to. Joseph, the one of the 12 sons who is sold in slavery and winds up obeying God, realizes his purpose, and saves the Israelite nation because of the dreams and saving the food with the famine and everything. And of course he winds up being the leader over Egypt and all the food in Pharaoh's help. Moses, handpicked, chosen to be the one that would lead the people out of Egypt after all those years of slavery. Joshua, who would take over after Moses dies and be the one who would lead the people the rest of the way to the promised land. Boaz and Ruth, from different places, both picked and chosen. Ruth not even an Israelite. Boaz winds up being a redeemer, and the two of them wind up having a son named Obed, who would have a son named Jesse, who would have a son named David, who's the writer of this song. David, who we've already talked about, winds up being the king, has a son, Solomon, who's handpicked to be the one to build the temple. Do you realize, so we're going here, all these people had a special purpose that God had given them, that God created them in a certain time, in a certain place, with certain qualities and attributes, and all they had to do was just follow God's will and be obedient. I'm going to name more. You can think of them. Daniel, you know that story. Esther, who saves her people by just being obedient to God. Think about how afraid that lady must have been. She could have been executed on the spot, but stood up. Isaiah the prophet talked loud when nobody would listen. Just saying to the world, God is who we should follow. Quit listening to Egypt. John the Baptist, who is seen as a wacko by people in his time, but he's just pronouncing Jesus is coming. Mary and Joseph. These two amaze me anyway. Joseph kind of gets kicked to the curb on this whole story because he's the one that lives. But Joseph, you never hear about Joseph again after Jesus is born. But there he is. He's the one man picked in all of history to be Jesus' earthly father. And then Mary, a young lady. The disciples, specifically Peter. The one man picked to be the leader of the disciples and lead the church. Zacchaeus, this one always strikes me funny because there he is, a short fellow, but he's the one God picked for Jesus to use to teach a lesson to everybody around. Just a short guy, tax collector, nobody liked, and they used him. The blind beggar, the Roman soldier, Mary Magdalene, Lazarus, Paul, Timothy, Mark. And this list goes on and on. We could add more names to it. But every one of those people were given that purpose as God knew them, they knew him, and they followed what God asked them to do. And you hear a lot of those times when we read about those, about God's Spirit speaking to them. They just had their relationship, but God knew them, and it just shows us how great he is because he's made us, and he knows us personally. So for us today, it goes even further because not only does God know us, if we respond and we've got a relationship with Jesus, and we can know him personally in that way too. And the Holy Spirit just guides us. So it's a good reassurance to just know that God is that powerful, because when things in the world get haywire, knowing that he's in control and that he's that great, it just calms us right down. That's a peace that you can't get anywhere else. So, anybody got comments or questions? As usual, I have more notes that we never get to, but that's okay. Anybody? Kevin, pray for us.